Okay, as the reality of the Trump presidency truly sinks in, millions of concerned Americans are asking, what will be different? In fact, that's the title of a conversation happening next Wednesday. What will be different? A conversation on religious activism in a changing America. It's just one in a series of discussions called Tomorrow Will Still Be Ours, a festival of visionary arts, ideas, and activism.
Well, Brian Tate is the founder and president of the Tate Group consulting firm. He's also the curator of the series, and he's here with us right now. Welcome back to BK Live, sir.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
We're also delighted to have the Reverend Kaji Dousa, the senior pastor at the Park Avenue Christian Church on Manhattan's Upper East Side. Thank you for braving the weather and joining us.
My pleasure.
And via Skype, yes, technology is working even in the snowpocalypse. From Washington, D.C., we have Lisbeth Melendez Rivera, who is with the Religion and Faith program at the Human Rights Campaign. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Is it snowing in D.C.?
No, it's no one means it makes.
Good, okay, we have to ask the hard-hitting questions. But now, to go to you, Brian, how did this come about? And what other topics are you guys going to be exploring?
The Tomorrow Will Still Be Ours festival came out of a conversation I had with Gavin Brown. He's a gallery owner and art dealer who's got locations in New York City and overseas. And I started the conversation series, What Will Be Different, back in December with a talk at New York Live Arts around what will be different for women's lives. And then last month, we were at the Rubin Foundation 8th Floor Gallery with a conversation on what will be different for Muslim Americans. And in the course of reaching out to other cultural institutions and presenters to learn who would be interested in hosting a future conversation, Gavin and his team were immediately responsive and said that they would not only like to host one of the conversations, but would actually like to present a full month of activity, which then became this festival. So last night we kicked off with a powerful conversation around what will be different for Black activism, on which Reverend Kaji was one of the panelists. And next week, next Wednesday night, we're back at Gavin's gallery in Harlem for a discussion around what will be different for religious activism. Yeah. And then the final Wednesday on the 22nd, we're back at Gavin's gallery with a discussion around what will be different for environmental activism. And we closed the festival with a big rap party concert called Say It Loud, with performances by the Burnt Sugar Orchestra, with Vernon Reid, Shrine for the Black Madonna. Yeah.
I love Vernon Reid.
Vernon is phenomenal. Very excited.
But don't speed us to the end of the month yet.
Okay,
let's relax
but I do just want to say that everyone who is participating in their performances before each conversation, Storyboard P performed last night, Alicia Hall Moran will perform next week, Razia Saeed for the environmental one. Everyone, the performers, the moderators, the panelists were so excited when I contacted them to learn, is this something you would be available for? Everyone immediately said yes, and it's just dynamite. Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, we want to talk more about that because we're looking forward to all of it. But Reverend Kaji, let's ask you a question. As a leader in the faith community, what do you see your role is during this paradigm shift from Obama to the new president?
Well, the faith community is having to reassess everything right now because in some ways we've been a little bit culpable, or at least in some ways very culpable for the situation we're in right now. A lot of us have been afraid to speak up on particular issues, afraid that we might lose our nonprofit status or that someone might retaliate in all kinds of ways. It's scarier to step forward and say something is wrong. It's much easier to talk about how to be happy and get rich, which a lot of my Christian colleagues have been doing and making a lot of money off of for years. Right. So right now we're realizing, oh my God, we're about to turn away, or we are turning away refugees. And Jesus, who I follow, was a refugee. So how does this wind up jiving? And it doesn't. So everyone's having to reevaluate how we're going to be relevant right now, or else more and more churches will be closing because people don't want to have anything to do with something that's not actually contributing to a more safe, more just, and loving world.
So, Lisbeth, we know that you are at one of these intersections that is a little unique because you work for HRC and we're aware of the tremendous work that happens there, but you also focus on religion in that capacity. So these are issues that you may have been wrestling with and confronting longer than the wider body that suddenly finds themselves having to deal with these things.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that is super important here is just to echo some of the comments from my colleagues is that religion has been struggling with the idea of what does it look like when you intersect sexual orientation, gender identity, race, economic justice, all of the issues that affect our lives as not just people of color, people of faith, people at the margins, just like Jesus was. In my particular case, I am the director of Latinx and Catholic initiatives. So I get to work with not just immigration, but also against a church that is very much standing, against its own principles in excluding many of us from what it is, the body of the faith that we've decided to practice. So it's a new moment, but it's not as an old one as we continue to work through both the inside and the outside of society. One of the most disappointing issues that I confront and work with every day is that 54% of Catholics that voted for candidate Trump and made him number 45. And what does that look like when, in one hand, they're saying, I support you as an LGBTQ person, and yet voted for somebody who stands firmly against everything that we are.
So how do you not get into an oppression Olympics with other disenfranchised groups and focus on the issues at hand? Lisbeth, can you answer that first?
Sure. I think it's something that comes very innate. We know in this moment of Black Lives Matter and the anti-Black sentiment that exists in other communities of color, that we need to work within ourselves to be able to move forward in a single direction. It is, not just understanding that it's not just about our sexual orientation, our gender identity, it's about economic issues. It's about how all of those using a base, such as the situation, that our Black brothers and sisters, siblings, confront in this moment, that we move forward. And that is not a priority, and that is not a hierarchy of oppression. That is actually an acute understanding of where we are as a society and how we move forward from here. Intersectionality means that we take a look at not just everything and anything that we are, but that we move forward with a single idea, understanding where the origins of oppression are in U.S. society and worldwide, and then move forward with solutions. And religion plays a huge role in that, given colonization from Christianity.
So, Reverend Kaji, clue us in a little bit onto this idea of liberation theology.
Absolutely. Well, liberation theology was born out of a church and a group of people who were trying to figure out how do we serve the people who are poor and oppressed by these structures that we helped to create as colonists in these areas, particularly in Latin America. And out of that, the voices of the people started to raise, saying that Jesus was a liberator. And Jesus taught that our oppressions are linked. So there's no way that you can be oppressed and I'm not also oppressed. My liberty is tied in with yours. And that's at the heart of liberation theology, that Jesus's primary focus was allowing people to be free to love God, free to serve each other, free to be loving creatures rather than taking away from the world, much as the colonists had all over the world.
So just a quick follow-up question. How do you not, no pun intended, preach to the choir and appeal to people who may oppose certain political or religious beliefs that you're trying to, change their minds? How do you appeal to them?
Well, I actually start by preaching to the choir, which, if you ever know a choir, is going to wind up being a very diverse group of thinkers. But you do have to give people continued and sustained hope throughout all of this, because every week people are coming to church saying, I just listened to the news for 7 days, and I need a new infusion of energy and inspiration. So you got to start there, I think. I would say, an apologist, and I wind up going out there talking to people who are curious. I do not talk to trolls. It's not a place where I put my energy. But I will sit there with someone who says, religion has been irrelevant in my life, or the church has told me that I'm gay and I'm wrong, or I'm trans and I can't be. We go out there, and many people like me right now are starting to say, we are sorry. And we're going to work together to fix this. I think that's the big key. So there needs to be something that keeps working with the people who we already have been serving, because you can't forget them, and then to actually realize the church has a really important role to play, or faith institutions in general, in injecting hope into moments that can feel pretty awful.
So Brian, the Reverend talked about these diverse thinkers that might make up a choir, but talk about diverse thinkers. You have this world-class gallerist and art hero, and you're bringing in religiosity and all these things that might seem like strange bedfellows. So in addition to just showing you have a cool Rolodex, how did you synthesize all these people and decide, okay, we need to tackle this, and bring in people of faith as well as artists and make this mix?
Well, you know, the issues in communities that are affected by the new political landscape in our country and frankly around the world are infinite. And I mentioned the conversations that we did before February as an indication. You know, the conversations coming up around people who are disabled, around various immigrant communities. You know, it's an endless list. So in terms of the ones that we selected for Gavin's space for this festival, you know, they were ones that felt very much of the moment, but quite frankly, you know, everything is of the moment right now. And I want to pick up on Reverend Kaji's point too, is that, you know, one of the things that we firmly believe is that it is important to be aware of and to respond to and even to react to some of the things that are happening right now. And they come in such a barrage and in such an array. But it's equally important and perhaps even more important to imagine the future and to envision the world that we want to create and how we can collectively work to advance that vision. And that's one of the things that we try to do through these talks. But frankly, it's something that I think that so many of us are engaged in just in the course of our lives, especially right now. So in looking at panelists and looking at topics, you know, this series involves people that I don't know. I mean, they're added to the Rolodex because I research them and find who's doing things that are really meaningful right now. And I ask people who are doing things that are really meaningful, and that's what led me to Lisbeth. And that's what led me to so many of the other people who are on the panels.
Now, Lisbeth, excuse me, what are some of the issues the public might not know about that the Human Rights Campaign is working on?
We're currently involved in really strong national coalitions, or tables as they're called this day. You know, every generation has a different name for how we coalesce together. Very few people know that our work in supporting the immigrant march, the women's march, you know, upcoming marches around economic justice and others. We do know and understand, and maybe at times have not been that good in showing our coalescing with others and the coalition work that is happening right now. I'm actually quite proud of the fact that we had large representation from not just our, you know, our offices here in Washington, D.C., but across all of the marches in the women's rights, you know, marches, as well as the immigrant and economic justice and racial justice marches that happened in the last few weeks. We've had strong representation from our membership. We have strong commitment from an organization, and we've been able to do the work such as this programming to showcase that sexual orientation, gender identity, and expressions are not the only issues that we are invested in, particularly because they're not the only issues that we represent as queer people, right? We are people of color, we are poor, we are women, we are trans, and I think at times that message has not been clear, particularly at this time, and you'll see a more clear message from us moving forward as to how we do that work stronger, better, and more of the moment.
Reverend Kaji, I'm really curious, we only have a few minutes. How do you view Christian refugees versus non-Christian refugees in such a time where there seems to be such a distinct line in between the two?
Well,
Someone's
you have
trying
to
draw one, right?
Yeah, someone is.
That is a ridiculous and unchristian distinction. There is no way Jesus would have turned away anyone. And in fact, he wasn't out there serving Christians. There was no such thing at the time. You know, he went out there and served everybody. And any Christian who's trying to say that we need to privilege the ones who are coming from Palestine or wherever, is not being faithful. There's no such thing as following Jesus and turning away a refugee. That's ridiculous. And many other faith traditions would also agree from their perspectives.
So I just want to run down to DC for another minute. The president had his prayer breakfast where I guess he spent more time trashing Arnold Schwarzenegger than he did uplifting folks. So I wondered just about this environment. Do you feel like more people are turning to religion and things outside of themselves for some sense of guidance, even down in the districts?
So, I don't know if that's an implication that we have no faith down here in the district, which we do, a strong one, as a matter of fact.
Okay.
The National Prayer Service, that was not a prayer, that was not a service. That was, as you probably said, an elevation of a complaint that our president had at the time, which was quickly supplanted by something else he didn't like. The joke around the streets in DC is what is the wine of the day, and with that I don't mean red or white, but what is the complaint that stops us from getting together? And having said that, yes, there are people. I don't think religion will be the word that I would use, but coming back to our faith, be it organized religion or not, there is a strength in our spirituality and the faith that brings us together, that you see people coalescing and coming together around. Be it that we're guerrilla Catholics that have services led by women, or that we are evangelicals, who are supposedly bundled in this conservative place, but get together in places like Wild Goose in North Carolina to celebrate the environment and economic justice and queer people in amazing ways. We are seeking solace, and we're seeking solace in the best ways that we can, and trying to do self-care. And in DC, that's a hard thing to do, so we look for each other and we pray with each other.
We could talk about this for the next 4 years, at least. But Brian Tate, esteemed curator, I want to give you the last word here to plug those events. Tomorrow will still be ours. How do people get tickets or get involved?
Admission is free. You can RSVP at gallery@gavinbrownbiz.net. Is that right? I'm sorry.
Just Google Gavin Brown.
Google Gavin Brown. We're up in Harlem at his space at 127th Street, and if you, it's all very findable by Google.
Mm-hmm.
But we're there on Wednesday, the 15th, for the discussion on religious activism, and back on the 22nd for the discussion on environmental activism. And on the 24th is the wrap party. All events are free, all are welcome, and all are needed.
Yes, thank you very much
We
for joining
appreciate all
us.
you guys.
We really do. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Good